All right. Hi, Patreon folks, and thanks for supporting me. I wanted to do something that a lot of people ask me about and have asked me about over the years, which is my vocal chain setup. My vocal chain setup has been pretty much about the same for probably the past decade. I've tried different plugins and I've used a couple different things throughout the years and stuff like that. But for the most part, I'm bussing out to a verb, a slap delay, a longer delay, and then this thing I call vocal air, which is like a stereo type of thing that helps the vocals cut through the mix a little bit better. So I've recorded this video 3 times now, and hopefully this will work because this has been a royal pain in the anus. I brought up a track here. Some of you have seen it. It's the Boulevard of Broken Dreams. I did it like in the style of Ozzy. So I'll just show my vocal breakdown in that a little bit, and like I said, my vocal chain. To start off with this, we'll jump into my buses, so my verb and my delay and things like that. Here's the session. We have my verb here, we have my slap delay, we have my longer delay, and then we have the vocal air thing. So now, when it comes to verbs, well, first of all, let's talk about bussing. So if you're kind of new to recording or you're new to mixing in your DAW and things like that, your application, Pro Tools is mine, bussing can get a little confusing at first, or it was for me for some reason, but essentially all the bussing is that basically most of the time you don't put a reverb or a delay directly onto a track. You have your clean track and then you send it to another thing so that you can turn your delay up and down or your verb up and down. And that's essentially what bussing is. Sometimes you might have a couple different guitars and then you want to be able to control all of them at the same time, so you'll bus all those to another track and just call that fucking guitars, and then you can move your fucking guitars up and down. So first of all, so I have my vocals are always going to a verb. I use a lot of Slate Digital plugins as well as Universal Audio's plugins. They make the best plugins for the most part, in my opinion. And so this is Slate's plugin. I love big reverbs, so I usually use a church verb, and we can hear that here really quick. I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes. So as you get further and further into this stuff, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. A lot of people with verb on vocals will use plates, verbs, and to me, if things are sitting in the mix right, it doesn't really matter too much. So don't get too crazy thinking about it or trying to figure out the most perfect one. And there's analog verbs and there's all kinds of shit. Same with delay. As we get into my delay over here, I'm using the delay straight from Pro Tools, and it doesn't make that big of a difference. A lot of times this has a bigger feedback. I guess I wanted it to be larger, and then I usually have it synced, and even though I don't hear. And cool thing I learned from Chris Lord Algae tutorial was that once you have your verb or your delay synced, move one of them just a tiny bit so that you have them just a little bit out of sync, and then it'll add a different texture, add a nicer kind of feel to it. So I have my longer delay and I have my shorter delay. We'll listen to those at the same time here. I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. So those are playing at the same time. Like I said, adds a little bit more texture to have both of them, a faster and a slower delay. So those are what's happening there. Typically I have the same thing, just one sped up and one not, but over here I did this weird thing and tried to add it, and we'll get into that. But anyway, pretty simple. Now we'll talk about this air thing. On my first album, a guy named Jason mixed my first album, my Philataxis album, and he added this doubling effect thing just to give a little bit more kind of presence and interest in the vocal. And I've imported that into like every session I've ever done now, because I kind of always liked it, and then it was even a safety blanket, like, oh, it's got to sound the same like he did it. And I still do. I think this is made by Waves. It's called a doubler. Very subtle in terms of how I'm using it, but like I mentioned, having it on there in a bus and being able to kind of turn it up and down a little bit sometimes helps the vocal to kind of come through a little bit more, mostly because it's just in stereo. So I'll show you what it sounds like here if you can even hear it. I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me, and I walk alone. It's like I said, mostly getting a stereo effect or maybe a stereo width kind of effect, but I don't mess with it too much. I just import it into every session, and I like having it there. And when we talk about my sessions here, you know, I know a lot of times people are finding me from just like karaoke covers and just singing something. I'm using the same thing all the time. I'm barely ever changing anything. Maybe a little bit of EQ or maybe a little bit of warmth in some plugin or something like that. But people say really absurd, stupid shit like, you know, they think you're getting a sound like that Chris Cornell used and that's why you sound like him, or Ozzy in this case. Like, that's absolutely fucking bananas. So what you see me doing here is what I'm using almost all the time. Now, there was one more effect I added on here to try to get a little bit more of an Ozzy sound, and that was like a Sound Toys plugin. And we'll see, I'm using a Filter Freak and just weird stuff. I'll show you what it sounds like. Because I listened to Ozzy and I was hearing in some of these songs like these weird effects in the background, and I was like, I want to do that. So, come on. I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. So, not a big deal. Anyway, so what you're hearing, by the way, if you don't know, is a vocal double, which is me singing the song a couple different times, almost exactly the same, and then putting them on top of each other. That's what a vocal double is. I didn't even line them up. In this case, I was moving pretty fast and didn't know if people would like the track or not. To go off on a small tangent, as we get into YouTube and creating music for the internet and shit like that, everything nowadays is fast, fast, fast. Do it, get it done quickly, gotta do it. And sometimes you make stuff and you're like, I don't know if anybody's gonna watch this. And in the world of TikTok and all that stuff, your production skills need to get faster and faster, and some tools help with those things. But yeah, sometimes, you know, you'll notice these things and sometimes you won't. After a while, it doesn't really matter. You know, if somebody really liked this or people really like this and it got a lot more numbers and views, I would go back in and then clean it all up and then release it on iTunes or something. But in this case, yeah, you can tell I didn't even go and edit and clean all this up because I didn't fucking feel like it. But anyway, doubles are the same thing sang, and then they're over top of each other. So Pro Tools has been terrible to me lately. I have people working on the case. Sorry about the errors. I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes. So that's the vocal double that you're hearing. They're used it. That's used all the time. If you don't know about that, and now you're starting to learn about it. You start doing it with your vocals. You'll hear everybody using it. Pink Floyd, everybody. I learned about it from Pink Floyd, which is why I bring them up. Now let's get into my vocal chain breakdown here. Slate Digital plugins. I use the Slate Digital mic, which is a very neutral mic, and then you can apply all these mic emulators on it. There's a laundry list of mics you can put on here. I tend to use this one sometimes. It doesn't really matter. There's kind of different subtleties, which brings me to another good point, is that if you have cheaper gear, you have a cheaper microphone, and you're one of those people that, like I was, that sits there like, man, I bet I'd sound so much better with this mic or something. Probably not. And even if you kind of did, you probably wouldn't be able to hear it because you need to take time to allow your ears to develop and really start to hear these subtleties. And I do mean subtleties. We can sit here and change this mic over and over and over again, and sometimes you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference, which moves us on to the virtual channel that is here next. In a digital space, when you're recording, it's completely void of anything. So sometimes recording music, you can have trouble filling up that space and just cram more instruments or more stuff into the mix. And it's because recording into analog or onto tape, there was a consistency or a gel and a sound to that. Essentially with tape, it would have been like kind of a thing like that. So there's a sound, there's a substance to it already, but digital does not have that. So anything we can put on that starts to add a little bit more of an analog feel or sound tends to help with those things, and it's always a great way to go in, especially in the digital realm. So once again, if you were to put this on and then turn it off and try to trick me, I don't think I'd really be able to hear it, but we're trying to continuously catch on to that analog sound and breathe more life into this digital realm. Now, this is the EQ I typically use. Singing like Ozzy, I must have had some crazy frequencies because I never use this EQ like this. And especially boosting all this, very, very strange. And it might have been something dumb I did, but anyway, I love this EQ. You got your top up here and your bottoms down here. I know that, like I said, when I sing like really bright like that, I walk a lonely road, I might get some terrible frequencies, and in this case I did. Now, I've been using these two compressors lately simultaneously. I like this analog compressor, this VG2A. I usually use presets. I'll use this on smooth vocals, but sometimes it'll duck my vocals a little bit too much, so then I'll add this distressor on, and just, about 10%, something like that. And once again, if you don't use Slate plugins, it's another great thing that all these plugin companies are incorporating in, is that you can add an effect and then you can turn how much that effect is on. So keeping that about right there. What we see here is standard stuff, a little bit of analog, a little bit of EQ, compression. Now we'll move on down the chain. We have another standard thing. This is the Slate de-esser. So my S's might have been a little bit too heavy. One of my favorite plugins from Universal Audio. This is an EQ, and a vintage EQ that adds a lot of color and a lot of warmth and things like that. I will use this on all kinds of stuff, from guitars to bass to drums, everything I can put it on, because it just adds this analog kind of thickness. I'll use this on the male vocal preset, and it adds a lot of warmth, and I really love it. So I'll show you the difference between without having it on and with having it on.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known.
So it must have done something to really excite that upper range, which might have been why I was ducking it so much there. But saying like this, like that Ozzy, I needed some warmth in there. So I love this thing. Universal Audio, does a really great job connecting to all these old school, or making all these old school plugins. So. And recreating all this old vintage gear. Then we're putting it on tape, rather subtle again, but trying to give a little bit more of that analog feel. This is by Slate as well. There's a couple different ones that you can use with this stuff, but that's what I'm using there. Very subtle. If I turn it on and off, you probably won't hear a difference.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that
So again, you hear a little bit of excitement in the vocal. You hear a little bit of a texture kind of come through there. Then there's another great plugin that, if you don't know about it, it's called Soothe by Oki Sound, or however you say it, Oak Sound. Oki, God, I'm dumb. Anyway, Oak Sound, especially in a case like this where we have a vocal that's got a lot of frequencies that are annoying to the ear, we'll see this plugin, good God, Pro Tools, we'll see this plugin dropping some of these frequencies out in real time as it's playing back, or as it's bouncing out or whatever. So as it's going through and those frequencies cutting through and annoying everybody, this will just keep toning them down as they happen, which is fantastic. Great for overheads, great for a guitar that has too much like on top. Really great plugin. Now we get into the world of Auto-Tune. As I was mentioning, sorry, Chuckles, ran over my dog. Everything nowadays is fast. You got to do it fast. You got to make it fast. You got to have it happen. I got into many years where I didn't want to use this stuff because I was my integrity, and I wanted it to be natural. Blah 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 blah. But it doesn't matter anymore. If I don't use it, people will be like, "You fucking Auto-Tune," and they'll get all, and everybody knows everything on the internet, and it's annoying as shit. So in terms of making things quickly, it's easier to be able to tune things in and just use an Auto-Tune to tighten them up and have a tighter performance, because that's what you want here, is you want a nicer finished product, obviously. So this is the Waves Auto-Tune plugin. Sometimes you can dial in. I think this was an A minor that I recorded this in, so that'll help me a little bit. But I'll let you hear it without, because if you're hiding behind these things because you're a dog shit singer, obviously that's a little bit different. But once again, how many people that are famous, making millions of dollars with music, can't sing for shit, that have to use these things? It doesn't matter anymore. Don't worry about it so much. It's a tool that helps people get a finished product. So here we'll listen to a second without.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's some to me.
See here, I'm already pretty much on point, but it just gives it a little bit of that extra. Then the last thing I'll do is, I was taking off a little bit of the low end here, but I'll put a simple EQ on the end, because if I automate this vocal, meaning go through it and turn certain things up and down, like, oh, that line's a little too heavy or a little too loud, I'll put a simple EQ so that I can literally just turn my level up and down here, because after you automate, you can't turn your slider up and down. But that's my vocal chain. It is the same as it's always been. It's the same as it's been for a long, long time, minus this weird thing I put on here. But I hope you learned something from this. I hope it does something for you. Let me know what you want to learn about. I'm happy to teach more. I'm happy to show, mixing tutorials of songs and get into some of the more nitty-gritty. But yeah, this is my vocal chain setup. If you have any questions, ask. I'll talk to you soon.